So this is a very, very interesting keynote speech with a fantastic keynote speaker, Stacy Klein-Gardner. The title is An Inclusive Engineering Mindset K-12. So I'm calling Stacy to the stage while I'm talking about her CV. She holds a degree from Duke University, Drexel University, and Vanderbilt University. She is the founding executive director of engineering for US All and also a founding member of Duke's Women's Impact Network. She currently serves as an adjunct professor of biomedical engineering at Vanderbilt University, serves on advisory councils at Duke and Drexel universities, and is dedicated to increasing STEM participation among females and underrepresented minorities. The goals we all try hard to achieve. So, welcome, Stacy. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here today. I am super excited to be with you. I hope that we'll have, hope I have some interesting thoughts prepared for you, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts and questions in the chat box as we proceed today. So without further ado, let me share my screen and we'll get started. All right. Let's see. Awesome. Sorry, it's asking me if I'm sharing, playing a video, and nope, I'm going to say no, and hopefully that takes care of that. Awesome. All right. So this summer, I attended another conference where I was given a copy of this report, which you probably can't see in my hands, but I'll talk a little bit about it more in just a couple of slides. And it's called the Inclusive Engineering Mindset. And this report really focused in on undergraduate engineering spaces with some tendrils into the K-12 space and into perhaps graduate education or things that might come past the undergraduate space. And it's a thought-provoking report. It's well written, but what it immediately made me think about is, well, what about K-12? How does K-12 play a role both in seeing the suggestions in this report that we're going to take a look at come to fruition? And what do we have to teach them, and what do we have to learn from them, and how do we work in partnership? So that was the beginning of my ideas for this particular presentation today. All right, so as far as we think about an agenda, you'll hear highlights from me about this engineering mindset report throughout the presentation. And you'll see, and actually in the bottom right of my slides, a lot of page numbers where I'm referencing different parts of the report. And I put those there so if you watch this later and maybe you get a copy of the report, you'll have a chance to go and read even more deeply about these things and approach them from a K-12 lens. So we'll talk a little bit about the report. We'll think a lot about how K-12 plays a role in this. And I'm particularly interested in stressing a systems approach. So it's a way that engineers think anyways, but it also will, I think, help us think about how these pieces work together to make, to hopefully help this report's goals succeed. So again, the name of that report is called the Engineering Mindset Report. And it's a vision for change in undergraduate engineering and engineering technology education. And you can find it at the URL of mindset.asee.org. So you can find the report there, you can read it later. But for now, I hope you'll hang with me and hear about some particular aspects of that report. So if you think about it, engineering education has been and remains a foundational discipline for modern society. Just a few thoughts here of like current topical areas of impact for engineering. And it's of course, a field that's always growing and changing. Yet, despite this foundational discipline status, our current mindset in engineering education is widely marked by some of the following characteristics that I wanted to bring up. You could have an engineering mindset that leads you to a weed out mentality that excludes people when we need more engineers at the very most for the success of our country and for humanity. You could have a mindset that really focuses in on introductory math and science courses, particularly calculus. Calculus is often viewed as the foundation for all engineering, and at times it serves as a proxy for engineering student talent when perhaps it should not. You could have a mindset that has an emphasis on technical competency. Not that it's not important, but it could have an overwhelming focus on that, as well as the monetary benefit that engineering might bring. Rather than thinking about engineering and its impact on humans and the good that it does in society, like this special chair that has, or tricycle rather, that has been developed for this young girl. That's an example of engineering that really focuses in on human impacts. You could have a mindset that focuses on an education system that can be inflexible at times and at times uninspiring to many segments of our population. And you could have a mindset that really focuses in on a reliance on professors or teachers who lecture at their students, despite extensive scholarly work that focuses on the merits of student-centered, active learning pedagogies. So given all those mindsets and a hope to change, we all know a lot of data that's out there. I could have presented a lot of slides that share the information about the things that need to change, that we need to have more women included. We need to have more people of color. We just need more people to understand what engineering is, to develop an engineering literacy, as well as to hopefully continue to have a growing number of engineers despite some of the population cliffs that we're reaching right now. So I think it's important that we remember this need, and this report really has a call for change at the undergraduate level. Well, my question is, where does K-12 come in? So I'd like to address that through 4 different questions today. I'd like to think about, how do we present engineering to someone who doesn't really know what that field is about? How do we prepare students for engineering? Who's included in engineering? And what are some of the systems of engineering? So we're going to work our way through this and think about this. And if you're not an engineering teacher, that's okay. You're a STEM teacher if you're at this conference. And all of us are working together to present these fields as something that's exciting and motivating to our students. So let's keep that in mind. First of all, let's think about, how do we present engineering? Often engineering is presented as, oh, if you're good at math and science, you should do this, or you have a reputation of it's really hard. Well, why don't we think about engineering as what it really is? Let's think about it as a problem-solving field. So we want to change the perception of engineering from those who are only really good at math and science to everyone who wants to be a problem solver. Because I think that is something that is more reflective of what engineering is. And it's something that's more exciting. People solve all kinds of problems within engineering. So let's think about it from that aspect. Engineering is definitely more than engineering design. Now, engineering design is something that is common and ubiquitous. It's something that can start with the wee little ones and runs all the way through graduate school into industry, and where you're just thinking about how many steps are there, how finely broken down are your steps in the engineering design process. So I don't want to belittle the engineering design process, because it's, well, first of all, it's a lot of fun, right? But there's more to engineering than just that. There are engineering concepts, or you might even think of those as engineering science fields that overlap with other scientific fields and are common to a lot of different parts of engineering. And then, of course, there's engineering science content that's specific to a lot of one type of engineering. An example might be, I'm a biomedical engineer, so you might look at the science of how a magnetic resonance imaging system works. So there are actual engineering concepts that can be taught within our K-12 system, and of course you're taught at the university system. There are engineering practices, things that we do that are common to engineering fields, and there are engineering habits of mind. So you might think about within the habits of mind. I put a handful of them on here, but they are the values, the attitudes, and the thought patterns that engineers use to make things work. Some of my favorite ones of those include optimism. That engineers are inherently optimistic about solving problems for others. We all rely on creativity. And I think back to when I picked engineering. I'll joke that it was a long time ago. And at the time I picked it because it was about math and science. But I learned to really understand that it's about creativity. And I even joke back to when I was in elementary school. I thought I wasn't creative because I didn't like to do the creative writing assignment that was given out in elementary school. But I came to understand that I am creative, and creativity is a hallmark of engineering and something that we can bring in lots of types of creativity into our space. I think that thinking about ethics is interesting. And what a role ethics plays into being a successful engineer, but also to think about the role that we need engineers to ethically go out and solve problems. These problems in the world need to be solved. If you think about the engineering grand challenges or the UN sustainability goals, solving those is an ethical responsibility of humans. Collaboration. Sometimes I think people think about engineering or other STEM fields as, you're in front of your laptop and you work there all day. But collaborating and working on teams is something that's inherent to our field. And I chose also improving to mention. Sometimes I think in school, we show students that math and science and engineering is a one-stop try. Like, you get to do it, you got your shot, we move along. But what is truly reflective of the field is that you're never done. You're done when you run out of time, perhaps, or money in the real world. But you're always improving upon something. And sometimes the best problems and the true role of engineers is to take something where it is and to move to the next step. Excuse me. I wanted to mention some other engineering literacies. I think there are many that people are familiar with, but I wanted to mention some that people might not be as familiar with. And I've taken these from a reference that you can see down at the bottom of the screen there. And I actually found the title of that reference really interesting. It's called Robot Proof: Higher Education in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. And I wanted to bring these things up to think about how engineers and other STEM professionals are making sure that the value of the human is never, ever taken away and cannot be replaced. So one of those is around data literacy. So we talk a lot about calculus, but what about data? We're in the era of big data. And so our students need to understand how to read, analyze, and then form insight into data that they either generate or are given. There's a technological literacy. Coding gets a lot of play right now, and it's obviously a valuable skill. But also, we've got problem solving, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and other data transformation tools. We have a human literacy. Engineering and STEM needs to be thinking a lot about the better integration of humanities, communication, and general design. The humanities inform why we do engineering. It allows us not to repeat the past. It's who we want to solve problems for. And those are all things that engineers need to be well aware of. Systems thinking, you're going to hear me hit on numerous times during this talk, but it's about thinking about viewing things holistically in an integrative way rather than in silos. Some additional literacies include entrepreneurship. So taking what you do as an engineer, first of all, it doesn't matter what you've done if you can't communicate about it. But then how do you take what you've done and influence society or something in the economy? So you're applying your creative mind in a way that takes your solution a step further. A cultural agility. So we need to be able to operate deftly in a varied and inclusive global environment at this stage. And of course, critical thinking, one of the 4 C's that we talk about a lot, to have disciplined, rational analysis and judgment. And that applies to all of life right now. There's a lot of data out there. Some of it's real, some of it's not. But thinking about teaching our students to be able to think critically, look at sources, and analyze real, authentic data. So I'll move on a little bit to thinking about how do we prepare students for engineering. There are some very traditional paths for engineering that are probably known at your school. You might have ideas about what you think they are. Your counselors, whether they're the counselors helping your students pick courses as you go through K-12 or as they think about applying for college, probably have some ideas about this, but I want to challenge some of those. And so I really want to hit on it with this particular slide. Mathematics education is one of the biggest gatekeepers we have to engineering and to all of our STEM fields. Now, let me be clear in saying that our mathematics preparation of our students in the K-12 level needs to be rigorous. It needs to be research-based, and it needs to help prepare our students as best as we can. Through that, we need to be sure that we're showing our students that mathematics is a useful tool for solving real-world problems. Now, I love math for the sake of math. I was definitely a math nerd all the way through, but I also like to think about math as a tool, and that students should be thinking about math, and physics, and biology, statistics, everything as a tool that you put in your toolbox so that you can solve problems later. The more tools you have, the more problems you can solve. And I definitely want our students and our schools, our counselors, our admissions offices for college to not think about calculus as the ultimate gatekeeper and the one thing that needs, that decisions need to be based on. We really need our students to be able to understand statistics, understand what a p-value is, to know what it means when you say something is significantly different, that has a real impact. Our students have to be able to analyze data because of the volumes of data and the propensity of data that we find everywhere. And our students need to be able to model things. Sometimes you can't afford to build what you're designing, but you could model it. And that's a huge piece of gathering information so that you can make informed design decisions. And I put on here the pipeline analogy. There's always the pipeline analogy. We want to get more people in the pipeline. We want them to stay in the pipeline until perhaps they become engineers or biologists or chemists. I want to challenge that, though, in a lot of ways. I think there are a lot of, we talk about how it's a leaky pipeline for sure, and that's what I'm trying to show there. But one thing about our pipeline is that there aren't a lot of re-entry ways. So if you step out of the pipeline, how could you come back into the pipeline? And I want to challenge the incredible step that happens when you are a 7th grader. And I'm a parent of a 7th grader this year, and so it's given me pause about where are you placed in math in 7th grade, and what is the lasting impact of that through middle school, through high school, and in your potential for future careers. I'd like to shake that up a little bit and to think about that not being such a gatekeeper to the future. I want to talk about who is included in engineering, and hoping that we can expand that list of who's included in engineering. So a few ways I want to think about that are through concepts that have gotten a lot of research lately. And I want to make sure that you as K-12 teachers know about some of this research and how it impacts the students that you work with. So one concept I want to mention is self-efficacy. And of course, self-efficacy is just defined as the belief that you can be successful in a specific task or in a challenge. And so there are lots of things that feed into your self-efficacy in both ways, whether it's mastery experiences. Do you believe you can take this test? Do you believe that you can solve this problem? There's verbal encouragement that you as teachers play a crucial role, and as well as parents, into giving students their self-efficacy. There are vicarious experiences where you help students envision that they can do something, as well as related emotional and physiological states. And all of this, of course, is linked to growth mindset. Carol Dweck, of course, is the one who gets a lot of press around growth mindset. But it is definitely, it's a real thing, and it's something we have to teach our students that it exists, and to help them think about where they fall on a growth to a fixed mindset. We're all, each of us is all over the place for different aspects of our personality and our skill sets, but we need to help our students know what that means and how to have a more of a growth mindset. I'll mention stereotype threat. Stereotype threat is the situational threat that arises when you worry that some negative stereotype about some identity that you hold might be confirmed. There's a lot of research around how this affects women and underrepresented minorities. There's a great book called Whistling Vivaldi. If you've never read it, I highly recommend reading it. Claude Steele talks about his own life as a Black man who felt like at times when he was on the streets, walking down a street at night, that he had to whistle Vivaldi in order to make other people around him comfortable to have him near him at night. And that's a very moving story. There's also some great data, particularly by Josh Aronson, around standardized tests. And simply when we ask students to give us demographic information and what that can trigger for a student, and their success on whatever test it is. So you can think about math as a big one for girls. And so even the College Board has changed how they take your sort of sign-up information, and they do it on a different day than when you're sitting for the actual exam. So there's a lot of data here. I would recommend looking into this topic if you're unfamiliar with it. Sense of belonging is one that I've been thinking about a lot more lately. And of course, sense of belonging is your feelings about being a part of a community. And why it's important is because sense of belonging has been connected by a lot of researchers to students' persistence and their learning in a particular field. So some things about sense of belonging is that it's a basic universal need. You can even look at like Maslow's hierarchy of things that a human needs. This is part of what people need. It's fundamental in its motivation to drive behavior. Context, time, and factors determine its importance, and it's related to mattering and how you feel like you matter in something. It's influenced by your multiple identities. So if I think about my identities, I identify as a female, I identify as an engineer, a mom, a lot of other things. And sense of belonging affects all of those things as to whether or not I feel like I belong in an engineering community. It can certainly lead to positive outcomes and success, and it must be satisfied as conditions change. So it's not a permanent thing. Once you achieve it, you have to keep making sure that you're there. Positionality is something that people are talking a little bit more about more recently. It's about who we are and how we are situated within the systems in which we participate. And we have to regularly stop and reflect on our positionality and how does it affect others. So you could be on the kind of a negative side of this. What if you're a white man and you think about, I don't understand what people are complaining about. My experience is just fine in engineering. Or perhaps you are someone who's often a minority in engineering, and you think, well, nobody helped me and I just did fine. How does that affect those who are different than that, who have a different sense of positionality and have a different sense of belonging? So I encourage all of us as teachers. I've been a high school teacher. You have to think about what are the position of the people coming to you and how do you meet them where they are, not necessarily treat them all the same because that's not maybe what they need. The last question I want to address is what are the systems of engineering and how does K-12 play into that? So if you think about systems thinking from an engineering standpoint, this is something that engineers are taught, hopefully in the K-12 space, but they're definitely taught it in the university space. And engineers have to be able to view systems from a broad perspective, seeing structures, patterns, and cycles rather than a single event, condition, or circumstance. So I wanted to think about systems thinking as it applies to what we're talking about today. And it matters because it requires seeing how outcomes are connected to and products of a system. So if we think about our students, how are they connected to and products of a K-12 system? And we can't just try to change an individual's self-efficacy or reduce their stereotype threat or increase their agency if we don't try to also change the system in which they live. So we can do things all day long to get more girls into engineering or into physics, but if we don't change the system in which they're entering, our impacts are going to be limited. So I wanted to think, and I made my own, this is a little bit ugly, so forgive my graphics. I wanted to think about the K-12 student kind of at the center of this system and all the different things that impact this student. Parents have a large voice, teachers, we have school counselors, there are admin and other policymakers that might affect the student directly, but they also influence the teachers. Government plays a role, industry plays a role, community colleges and universities all play roles. So how do all of those things then create a K-12 student that might become an engineering literate member of society, or even possibly also consider a post-secondary engineering student role? So some things I think that matter: professional learning. I think they matter for all of us as teachers, admin, counselors. I wanted to make you aware that there is a set of standards for the preparation and professional development of teachers of engineering. And the standards are listed here on this slide. I think we have to be careful to reward innovative teaching practices. We have to expand the knowledge base of teachers themselves from K through 12. And we have to improve teacher self-efficacy to believe that they can teach engineering, they can teach STEM, whether they were perhaps trained at it if you were a high school teacher, but also for our elementary school teachers to really empower them as well. The role of counselors. We have to make sure that our counselors are getting professional learning around our STEM disciplines. I can't encourage enough the chance for counselors to take part in some sort of experiential, hands-on learning themselves, where they act as engineers or they act as a scientist, so that they know how it feels and experience some of the joy that we have as teachers. So that's a type of professional learning we need to make sure is happening. Obviously, counselors need to know what the prerequisites are for engineering in college and to make sure they're accurate and up to date, because there's a lot of work trying to change that now. So we need to make sure they have current information. And we need to know about credits for prior learning. Where can students earn this? There are a lot of different ways, from dual enrollment to credit by inspection to AP programs and things like that. So there's a lot of ways that we can help our students get a head start in these STEM fields. Parents. I don't know, the more I teach, the more I think about the role of parents, or maybe it's because I'm experiencing more years as a parent myself, but we need to expand the knowledge base of parents, because a lot of them have math anxiety, math fears. All they can say is that engineering is hard, or maybe worse yet, that engineers drive trains, when in fact they're problem solvers. So how do we help our parents know more about the fields we hope their students might enter? We have to acknowledge the role that parents play in determining what their children will value, what they'll study it, and where they'll study it. We also need to be sure that in the K-12 space, that we are sure to leverage universities, industry, retirees, professional societies like IEEE, government. There are a lot of ways that all of these people honestly desperately want to give back, and they're trying to figure out how to give back. And this is one way that we have to really work on our partnership and our communication across what can sometimes be a gap from K-12 to all of these other groups, again, particularly including IEEE. So I want to pause here and give you examples of two different programs that I think are doing a good job of some of the things that we've been talking about. Now, in full disclosure, Engineering for Us All, that's my program. So you're going to hear about it from a pretty biased person. And we're going to share a little bit more about youth engineering solutions as well. So E4USA is a more high school facing program, and Youth Engineering Solutions is a K-8 facing program. So I want to tell you a little bit about both of those. So Engineering for Us All, or E4USA, as I'll call it, is actually based on 22 years of academic research. We really began working on how do you assess engineering design portfolios. And we've grown over the years with a lot of funding from different people, but more importantly, recently, the last 6 years, the National Science Foundation has been very generous in funding really the creation of E4USA. And so I want to give thanks to them for their support and all the universities that have done this work. In E4USA, we try to democratize and demystify engineering. That's our tagline, and we're approaching it through a series of high school engineering courses. All of our courses are based on these 4 big ideas that I want to tell you a little bit about. First of all, we want our students to connect with engineering. We want them to see engineering in society. We want them to develop their engineering professional skills. And not surprisingly, we want them to use the engineering design process. So a little bit more about each of those. The red thread is really about developing your engineering identity and connecting with engineering and thinking about engineer as a verb and a noun. We want them to think about the role of ethics in engineering. And we want them to think about how engineering will influence whatever career they choose. Engineers will play a role in that. We want them to see that. With our yellow thread, we focus in on engineering and society. So there's an easy link here to our engineering grand challenges, the UN sustainability goals, and thinking about how do we see those very lofty and big goals in very small ways in our local community. We talk about failure and its positive role in engineering, and we think about solutions when bringing, or issues when we bring solutions to scale. In the engineering professional skills realm, these are, I mean, yes, we call them engineering professional skills, but these are just professional skills. These are great things for all of our students to learn. So in our course, we overtly move from group work to teamwork. We teach teamwork and we assess teamwork. We look at and practice a variety of engineering communication methods, and we develop, implement, and adapt a project management plan. And lastly, we do the engineering design process. There's nothing really magical about our engineering design process list. It's a cycle like it is everywhere else, and it really just depends on how finely have you broken down the process. The one thing I like to call out, though, in ours that might be a little different than other people's is the 4th one on the list that I'm sure you can't read because it's too small, but it is about articulating appropriate STEM practices and principles in your design. So again, I like to think about what's in your tool chest that allows you to solve problems. Well, if you understand mathematics and you can use that language, if you can use science to defend and help you come up with the better engineering design solution, you're doing well. So we make sure our students articulate that. Again, I mentioned it's a 3-course series. So our first course is called E4USA Plus Making, where we do a lot in the beginning about helping students develop that identity. We introduce them to CAD, computer-aided design. We introduce them to the engineering design process. And ultimately, our students solve an engineering design problem that's found at their local school. And at the end of this course, if teachers have chosen to teach the additional CAD portions, students can also sit for a CAD industry recognized credential. Our second course is being piloted this year. It's called E4USA Plus Programming, and it's coming to you with generous funding from MathWorks. Here, we actually follow the AP Computer Science Principles course so that students could sit for that exam at the end, but we do that through an E4USA lens. So our students are learning how to code, they're learning that as another tool, and they are solving a problem in their community that needs some coding to solve it. At the end of the course, you've got the AP option and you've got a MATLAB Associates industry recognized credential option as well. And our final course, probably my favorite, is E4USA Plus Design. And here our students have 2 different semester-long problems that are sourced from their local community. So they're solving a problem for a real client with real stakeholders and really truly experiencing engineering. I mentioned this solution earlier in my slides. One of our schools in Albuquerque worked with this girl to develop a tricycle that she could use in lieu of being in her wheelchair. So it gave her a lot more mobility, and boy, does she like pink, so we made it pink for her. Another example, a very human-based one, is students at College Park Academy in Maryland developed adaptive lacrosse gear. So this young lady already, she's 9, already had a wheelchair, so she had mobility when she played lacrosse, but she needed some help with actually having that lacrosse stick and being able to make lacrosse moves. And that is how our students helped her. We're growing rapidly in E4USA, so we've had a lot of students already, and I'm particularly partial to the For Us All part of our name and some of the numbers we have here around the diversity of students who are participating in E4USA classes. I'll mention our liaison program because remember how I was talking about leaning in from industry and government and retirees, universities. We have a liaison program where we pair a practicing engineer or occasionally a retired engineer, but one-to-one ratio with our teachers, and we have our engineers in the classrooms at least 3 hours a month and really partnering with our teachers and bringing engineering to life. So if you want to learn more about E4USA, we have a lot of professional development coming up this summer. Here are just some examples of that on the screen, but really what you want to do is hit our website, which is e4usa.org. You can learn more about our courses there and sign up for professional learning. Now I'd like to switch gears to Youth Engineering Solutions and tell you a little bit about this amazing program as well. Youth Engineering Solutions is actually comprised of several programs, including We Engineer, and note the pun on the word we there, but also Yes Elementary, Middle School, and Yes Enrichment for the out-of-school space. So Yes's approach to engineering brings together these 3 different aspects, which I'll describe a little bit more, all in service to developing our youngest students' engineering identity. Yes really builds upon socially engaged engineering. They situate their problems in a societal context. They consider the impacts of the problem on different individuals, groups, or systems, and they think critically about the impact of their engineered solutions. They do that through a lot of ways. In the We Engineer, they use puppets. They use graphic novels as the students get older. We have videos where practicing engineers talk about what it is they do and students solve related problems. They talk a lot about their engineering practices. So you remember a long time ago, I mentioned some of the practices as well. And I love this list of all the different things that engineers do besides design or in addition to design and in service to design. And our engineering design process, again, it's the same process whether you're an elementary school or you're a practicing engineer. It's just how finely do you break it down. And so you can see the progression through the YES programs that we make our engineering design process more sophisticated as our students get older. Also, YES focuses in on asset-based pedagogies, which is something that everyone, of course, should be doing, where they're leveraging prior knowledge and experiences and allowing us to bring our diversity of experience to the table. That the students develop familiarity with materials, tasks, and terminology, and they create multimodal, flexible activities that are available for you as teachers to use. And I love this slide. I'm an engineer in the making, and they are engineering all sorts of different things at a lot of different age levels. There are a lot of units available to you through the different pieces of the YES program. And if you're interested, you should hit the URL yes.mos.org, and you can click through the different levels, viewing the curriculum, and then ultimately finding the one that strikes your fancy and then downloading it for free. So these are amazing K-8, well-researched units that are available to you. And again, their website is yes.mos.org. So in conclusion, let's think back to where we started. We started with a report that was focused on engineering and engineering technology, but with a really great goal around an inclusive mindset to those spaces. So I wanted to offer to you, what role does K-12 play in all of this? Obviously, I hope you see it's part of the system. I don't think that's a surprise to you, but I want to make sure that we're all thinking of this as one system. And K-12 has so much to offer. in shifting the engineering mindset to a more inclusive place. That can happen in the K-12 space and thinking about what students we encourage to participate in our STEM disciplines. And K-12 has a lot to inform in the undergraduate space. If you think about it, teachers are actually taught how to teach. Most engineering professors have not had that pleasure. So there is a lot to be learned from the expertise and the deep value that our K-12 educators bring to the table. So let's think together about how we shift the entire engineering education mindset to a more inclusive place. Make sure we think about how you do that in your classroom. How do you do that in your extracurricular places? How do you do that in your office or in the professional learning that you choose to participate in, or that you as an administrator choose to offer for your teachers and staff? With that note, I'll say thank you. And I put on the screen my contact information and the URL where you can find me, my email address. You can try, I'm not the best at picking up the phone, but there is my phone number. And so I'm going to pause here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, at least for now. And I'm going to turn the floor back over to my colleagues who have been minding the shop back here. I know we've been doing a poll, and I think we might have some questions ready. So let's start there.
Yes, Stacy. So we've got a couple questions that are coming in on the feed. So the first is, what are the core principles of an inclusive engineering mindset, and how can they be applied to foster diversity in engineering teams?
I love that question. I think you'll definitely enjoy. There are a lot of recommendations in the book. So there are 9 chapters with 6 different kind of key recommendations that they make, as well as sub-ones. So they're around creating flexible programs and removing barriers to entry, evidence-based pedagogy, inclusive and diverse engineering education environments, preparing campuses. So having the colleges think about being student ready and how are they going to take what we're delivering from K-12, as well as leveraging strategic partnerships and really trying to engineer a new mindset. So if we think about engineering teaming, there's a lot to that. And I think a lot of it is really helping individuals recognize the value of other people and what they bring. So it's easy to maybe look at someone and go, I know you're a terrible math student, but that might be true. But what else do they have? What experiences in life, what other skills do they have to bring to the table? And if you can think about teaming from an asset-based approach, you can get some really strong and powerful student teams in your classrooms.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions that have come in. What types of classroom activities or projects have you found effective in promoting inclusivity in STEM?
I love that question. So thinking about inclusivity, one of the things, and you probably saw that in some of the E4USA things that we took on, I love when we think about students who are different. Maybe they're atypical learners, maybe they're neurodivergent, and thinking about both them from 2 angles. One is, again, what can they contribute to the teams? And having their very unique views on life and the skills that they have, and having that contribute to actually participating in a team. I also really enjoy having projects that have us solving problems for people who are atypical or neurodivergent. So another example is I had a high school class work with a lower school elementary teacher who needed to teach her students how to cross the street successfully. And so the high school students created a remote controlled traffic signal for her, and so that she could practice these skills with her students. So I like to think about those and really get out into the community and think about what kinds of problems are out there and what are all the many different ways, what are the humanistic approaches for solving those problems. And I think a lot of it also, if you think about an activity in your classroom that maybe it focuses on growth mindset and having students learn what that is and take time to maybe put on a scale, where am I between fixed and growth on this subject and maybe this one. I think it's always instructive when you do that as an individual to think about, I don't know, I always think of myself as such a growth-minded person. But then if I think about something like writing, which still isn't my favorite thing to do, I might have more of a fixed mindset on that. So having students acknowledge where they are, but then through the year, maybe reassess that as you think about what you're teaching them, and maybe you're teaching them how to work on a team, or maybe you're improving their lab writing skills. All sorts of things you could do, but to really be open and communicative and maybe a reflective sort of way about being growth-minded. Or maybe it's teaching students what stereotype threat is. I remember clearly the day I sat at a conference and somebody told me what that was. And it was very freeing as a woman in engineering to know that the things I was feeling were normal and that there are ways to combat it as well. So I would encourage you to look at some of those types of activities. That might be more impactful than any lesson you might give on a particular learning standard to a student's life.
Okay, we still have more questions for you. So our next is, how can educators incorporate an inclusive engineering mindset into their teaching practices to better prepare students for diverse work environments?
I like this question too. Gosh. So if I think about the diverse work environment, I mean, I'm of course advocating that we make our work environments more inclusive also, so that it's easier to see how you and how everyone belongs there. So maybe some of that for our students is letting them see what some of the work environments are and having more people flowing both ways, bringing people into your classroom, and then where you can, taking a field trip somewhere, or encouraging a student to participate in an apprenticeship program or something like that. But always be very careful about the images that you're sharing with your students, rather purposefully or inadvertently, whether that's through a textbook or the posters on your wall, and making sure that those represent who you hope will be participating in the STEM disciplines in the future.
Okay, it looks like we have a couple more. The next is, what challenges do schools face in creating an inclusive engineering curriculum?
I will say probably a lot. I think that people are talking the good talk, but then you have to think about, how does this translate into the formal curriculum? So where are schools and how are they enacting the standards that are given to them? So I think standards is another layer that even more people have input and voice into. But when we're creating courses, we still have to accomplish those standards. But how do we do that in an inclusive way? So what are the things that you as a teacher are maybe supplementing a textbook when you're not given a choice usually as to what textbook you're using? What are you adding on to that, and what are you layering into it that helps you make engineering or any STEM course, whether it's third grade science or whatever it is? What are you layering onto there and being really thoughtful about that? I hope our administrators are thinking about what electives are offered. What's the, if you think about the K-8 space, how much attention is given to interdisciplinary work that includes our STEM disciplines with humanities and not keeping them as two separate silos? Or if you're an administrator, what programs of study are available to your school? And how can students either be in a college prep track or in a CTE track? Sometimes I wish those met more. So how do we allow both of those programs of study to see what's going on in other places? So I think there are a lot of layers to look at that I would mention.
Great. It looks like we have one more question, and then we're going to show you the poll.
Okay.
Have you check out those responses. So this is a little bit lengthy. It was powerful to see the mind gap of all the variables that impact a child and their path to engineering. What struck you most when doing that task? And what's a key action we can all take?
First of all, I felt like I was getting a little obnoxious with the arrows when I was making it. But what that says is that it really is a system that no part is isolated, that so many things can influence our students in positive ways and can influence our educators in positive ways. But we need to make sure that all the different pieces of the system are singing from the same song, and making sure that we are really looking to make it an inclusive space. So I think that really struck me. And I only even did part of it. I mean, I was just trying to get our engineers to get, or our STEM students to finish high school even. And then what happens to them? The arrows could have gone wild from there. But I wanted us to think about calling out this systems approach to solving problems, and that it's not just an engineering skill, it's a skill that we can all apply.
Great. So I'm going to show you some poll results here. Okay. So this was the poll. How prepared do you feel to implement inclusive practices in your STEM teaching? So maybe you could look at those results.
Okay.
That are changing as we speak.
Okay. I can't see the results yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. So so they say very prepared is at about 39%.
Nice.
Somewhat prepared is about 41%. Not very prepared is 15%. And not prepared at all is 7%.
Thank you for sharing those results with me. I'm glad that they are shifted towards the positive. I hope that this talk maybe give you some other ideas of how to shift your practice or your professional learning even more towards the positive. And I give hope for those who don't feel prepared. I'm glad you're here. You're listening. You're learning. I hope you can take away even one thing from today that you're going to try or you're going to look up and learn more about and think about how you could make your classroom a more inclusive space. So I hope that this has been an hour for reflection. I encourage you to go look up this engineering mindset report and read it and see what engineers at the university space are thinking and how hopefully that's going to have a positive impact for all of us.
Thank you, Stacy, for such an engaging presentation. I'm going to bring Stamatis up on stage real quickly so he can say a few words to you.
Okay, thank you so much. It was really inspiring. Yeah, and that kind of, the strategy on how to be inclusive, etc. We get a lot of questions about that. So yeah, we're gonna definitely use those suggestions. So thank you so much. I think that our audience enjoyed it very much, and we'll be in touch because I'm sure we will. And Donna is super excited. I know. We're gonna definitely use those stuff. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be a part of this impressive and important conference. I have enjoyed engaging on this topic with you. I hope that if there's anything that you need that you think that I can help you with, you'll reach out and we can all work together to make engineering and all of our STEM fields a more inclusive space. Thank you.
Thank you so much.